Well, hello and welcome to the Recovery Movie Meetups Celebrity Podcast. I'm your host, Ted Perkins, and today we're going to break down the amazing Clean and Sober starring Michael Keaton and Morgan Freeman. Michael and Morgan, welcome to the show.
Hi, Ted. It's great to be on your show. Big shout out to the Recovery Movie Meetups community.
I think what you're doing is great, and I'm glad that Clean and Sober is part of your program. It was a great movie to make at a time when I was just starting to get traction in my own career. So grateful to have been involved.
Michael, let's start with you. You were just coming off a string of comedy films like Beetlejuice, but this was a very dramatic turn for you. What attracted you to the project?
Well, I thought I had more to offer the world than just comedy, so when Glenn Gordon Caron came to me with the script, I thought the story was an important one to tell, bring the issue of addiction and addiction treatment into the public eye, because it had really never been done before.
Clean and Sober was made during the whole late 80s war on drugs era. Nancy Reagan just say no. So drug addiction was in the national spotlight. And like Michael said, it was a story that, well, I would say, needed to be told.
So Michael, tell us a little bit about the character you play in the movie, Daryl Pointer.
Yeah, well, Daryl is addicted to cocaine, among other things, including alcohol. And he's really messed up things. He's stolen money from his company to support his cocaine habit and wakes up one morning next to a woman whose name he probably doesn't even remember, and she's overdosed. So, obviously not cool. And so, with the walls closing in and the cops asking a lot of questions, he decides to check himself into rehab. But we see pretty early on, it's not so much an attempt to address his problem on the inside. It's more of a way to hide from his problems on the outside.
So he's phoning it in other words.
Totally. And that's where he meets Craig, the director at the rehab facility, who's been to the rodeo and dealt with this kind of shit a million times, as I'm sure the clinicians listening to this podcast have as well.
And of course, who better for the role of someone who has seen it all before than Morgan Freeman? Morgan, did you do any preparation for the role to give it, that kind of gravitas that it needed?
Gravitas. I'm effing Morgan Freeman, man. Ain't you heard? I was born with gravitas. But what I liked about the character of Craig, and this is something that I have come to admire about clinicians who work in the addiction treatment space, was that he didn't lecture Daryl. He didn't preach.
You make a good point, Morgan, because I think we can all agree that an individual's decision to address and change their use behavior ultimately comes from within. It's a kind of aha moment, or a series of aha moments, that ultimately can change the course of that person's life in recovery.
Another thing I think is important about this movie is that it's not just about Daryl in rehab. In fact, most of the story takes place after he's out of rehab and has to reconstitute his life in sobriety. And for this, he has the help of a sponsor. Another great thing about this movie, how it shows the sponsor system in action.
Yeah, the character of Richard Dirks, played by the amazing character actor M. Emmett Walsh, an unbelievable talent. Sadly, he just passed away this year. His monologue that opened this movie, I think, is one of his most important performances of his long and storied career.
Here's a guy who actually goes to Daryl's apartment to help urge-proof it, even to the point that he uses a small hand vacuum cleaner to suck up any residual cocaine powder that Daryl may have left in his dresser drawers.
Yeah, that's a wonderful scene. And I don't want to give away the ending here, but the advice he gives Daryl at the end of the movie is just so priceless, so powerful.
Yeah, I can't remember the line exactly. Ted, you quoted it in your book, Addicted in Film, but it's something to the effect like, somebody who thinks they can control somebody else's addiction needs to know how overblown his thinking is.
And he says this in reference to Daryl trying so desperately to start a relationship with a young lady he met in rehab, played by the very talented Kathy Baker, and trying to change her, when in reality, he needs to be focusing on changing himself.
Yeah, so true, so true. Guys, anything else that stands out about Clean and Sober that you want to mention before we close out this podcast?
I'll just say that I'm glad the film is included in the Recovery Movie Meetups program and is helpful to people because it shows what recovery actually looks like in real life. Sometimes gritty, messy, disjointed at times, but essential and achievable by anyone. even Daryl, especially Daryl.
And I would just like to say that this movie reminds us that these clinicians, therapists, volunteers, anybody and everybody who helps people recover from addiction, they're all heroes as far as I'm concerned.
They are. We are very happy to work with these kinds of clients all over the world. Well, Michael, Morgan, thanks for joining us on the Recovery Movie Meetups podcast. And thank you for making Clean and Sober the kind of movie that can help people look at their own addiction, look at the real work that goes into rehab from both sides, and hopefully continue on their successful recovery journey.
My pleasure, Ted. I love what Recovery Movie Meetups is doing. I think using movies to help people heal is an innovative approach, and I'm delighted to be on your show and be part of your community.
Ditto for me, Ted. I know you know that I recently starred in another movie called A Good Person, directed by Zach Braff, where I play a guy in long-term recovery who sponsors a young lady struggling with the fallout of her alcohol addiction.
Oh yeah, great movie, wonderful movie. Great job in that, Morgan.
Thanks, Michael. Ted, is that movie in your program?
Not yet, but it will be. We're adding new movies to our program all the time, and this is definitely one of them. So look out for that.
And don't forget Dopesick, too. You know, that little TV series I happened to win a Primetime Emmy for.
Listen to my man Michael over here, and here I thought you were just Batman.
I'm many things, Morgan, but luckily God isn't one of them. Too much responsibility. But you and that deep stentorian, authoritative voice of yours, keep doing what you're doing, man. You're truly a national treasure.
I feel the same about you, Cupcake. Can't wait to see your Beetlejuice sequel.
Come on, man. We all have to make a living somehow.
I hear you, brother. I hear you.
And with that, we'll say thank you for joining the Recovery Movie Meetup Celebrity Podcast, where my guests Michael Keaton and Morgan Freeman helped us break down the awesome and important movie Clean and Sober.